This video is made possible by Practical Defense Systems, the best online security training at the lowest prices. You can start your security career today online at pdsclasses.com. Check them out. Hi, this is Joel Persinger. I'm the Gun Guy. Thank you very much for all of your support of GunGuyTV and all the things you do to keep us going over here. I really deeply appreciate it. Today I've got Sam Paredes, my friend from Gun Owners of California, with me. We're going to talk about, well, let's see, a few things. We'll talk about the anticipated confirmation, hopefully next week, of Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court. We'll talk about Young v. Hawaii, which is in the, actually there was an en banc hearing. We'll talk about that. That's out of California, or actually out of Hawaii. We'll also talk about Rupp v. Becerra. Those cases deal with concealed carry, open carry, and also the assault weapons ban, plus some other cases that are working their way and winding their way through the court system, and a few other things that might be of interest to you. So let's get started with Sam. My friend Sam Paredes, thank you very much for being on the show with me again. I'm very, very grateful. How have you been?
Joel, I've just been living the dream. You know,
I'm not sure what that means in COVID USA, but okay.
Now I had a chance to spend a week in the high Rockies in Wyoming.
Oh,
Facing a very few elk around the world, and it was so much fun. My son was successful with his first elk, a 5x5 bull.
Wow.
And so that means we have elk meat for the rest of the year. That's a beautiful thing.
When's dinner? That's what I want to know. I'd have to go all the way to Sacramento. I don't know. I'm kind of on the other end of the state.
You're always welcome here. There's always a warm bed and a cool pool and a personal shooting range for you to enjoy anytime you come up.
Oh, I didn't know you had a personal shooting range. Yeah. Is it in the closet or the bathroom, or is it on the property?
No, it's outdoors.
Oh.
Berms and
wow.
You know. It's a pistol range. It's where I teach my CCW class.
See, I can honestly say I know people now because I know you, so I feel so much better. Well, listen, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. I think I watched the oral argument for Rupp versus Becerra, and I watched the oral argument for
Young
versus Becerra. I don't want to beat up on somebody too bad, but I think the attorney representing Young was a blithering idiot, or at least it kind of came across as one. His argument was really bad. He did a really bad job, and he wasn't very prepared. He looked like a guy that had shown up for a kindergarten class, not an argument before the en banc panel at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. On the other hand, the other gentleman representing Rupp, I thought did a pretty good job, all in all. But then I'm a layperson, so what do I know? And then I think we have another case on the roster that's going to hit pretty soon at maybe Judge Benitez's court, or is it beyond that? Where are we, I guess, with all of these things? And what is your impression, or if you could put your tea leaves out there or your finger to the wind, what do you think is going to happen with any of these?
Well, giving out the names of all of the cases will drive your listeners crazy, but Judge Benitez is going to get at least one more case that he's going to get to hear. And he's got multiple cases that are before the ninth. Rupp v. Becerra is a challenge of the California Assault Weapons Act. You heard the oral arguments. It was before two judges that were appointed by Trump, one appointed by Obama. Our prospects there are actually quite good, being that the two Trump judges have track records as being friendly to the Second Amendment, and most importantly, to the originalist concept of the law. That meaning that the law meant what it meant when it was written. And that especially goes for the Second Amendment. Text, history, and tradition. They referred to Justice Scalia's comments in Heller. So we're very confident in that case. Young versus Hawaii is a case that came over a couple of years ago, and the Ninth Circuit held it, waiting to see what the Supreme Court was going to rule on New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus the City of New York. As we all know, the Supreme Court punted. I believe in my heart of hearts that it was the four justices who support the Second Amendment did not want to take the chance that that case or any of the other 10 or 11 cases that they were considering hearing to go before the court, not knowing where Justice Roberts was going to land. He happens to ride the court right now on a pogo stick from one side of the line to the other side, and I think that the judges felt that it was so important that we get good rulings on the Second Amendment that they chose to dismiss or to not accept all of those cases. Now, what that means is that the rulings in all of those cases, very few of them were favorable to us, will apply in the various circuit courts, which means that a crisis still exists in that there are different circuit courts that have different interpretations of the same law. They're on the opposite sides. So ultimately, the Supreme Court is going to have to resolve those issues, since that is their first and primary job, is to resolve differences between the appellate courts. So Young versus Hawaii, this was a case where George Young from Hawaii challenged Hawaii's laws with regards to carrying permits. They didn't issue concealed carry permits, and they banned open carry, and he filed a lawsuit stating that that was a total violation of his Second Amendment rights. It came to the ninth when he lost the case in Hawaii, and then was heard with a 3-judge panel, and then was taken to a en banc hearing because they didn't like what the 3-judge panel came up with, and they voted on our side. So the interesting thing about it is that the en banc panel consisted of 4 Clinton appointees, 1 Obama appointee, 4 Bush appointees, 1 Trump appointee, and 1 Reagan appointee. So we actually have a majority of Republican appointed judges on that en banc panel. And whether you like the arguments that were made in the hearing, I tend to lean on the side of making sure that the court is always supported by very strong friend of the court briefs, and that is exactly what has happened in the case of Young versus Hawaii. Lots of very strong amicus briefs were filed in support of the Second Amendment, and I do know that the judges do read those petitions. So, gosh, Joel, I'm feeling pretty good. It is no longer a rubber stamp in the ninth, or the crazy ninth, or the Ninth Circus, or whatever you want to call it. It is changing thanks to the appointments made by President Donald Trump, and that could change what happens in the Ninth Circuit for decades to come. So,
which brings up an interesting question. You were talking about the Young v. Hawaii case, and I've looked at some of the briefs that were available for me to read, and I agree they're very well written, many of them, and they're very compelling on the side of gun owners. But when you watch the oral argument, you kind of ask yourself, okay, how much weight do these justices put on the oral argument? And I suppose that's probably justice to, depends on the justice and their individual where that's concerned. But it sounds like you're not terribly concerned about what I would call the lackluster oral argument, or the unprepared attorney, because of the value of the briefs. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
That is the way I am feeling, Joel. The oral arguments are definitely important. It's always important to have a good presentation made. But to think that that is the only thing that judges rely on, that's nothing could be further from the truth. They're looking at the case itself, what came out of trial, the ruling of the federal district judge. They're looking at the precedents that have been set by the United States Supreme Court. They're looking at their own judicial philosophy, and they're looking at the array of amicus briefs that have been filed on both sides, actually, to give more width and breadth to the argument, and to bring some thoughts that could not come up in in the oral arguments. It's always a very limited amount of time that is allowed for oral arguments. It's an incredibly short amount of time. And just to read one of the amicus briefs takes significantly more time than they allow for oral arguments. So in my viewing of oral arguments, both before SCOTUS and the appellate courts, the Supreme Court of the United States and the appellate courts, oral arguments are important. But typically, I find that the judges are trying to sharpen their pencils. They're trying to get responses to specific questions of the law. And some of the most incredible oral arguments that had an impact were delivered, quite poorly. And I'm not putting these cases in that category, but we're not what would appear to be the strongest arguments. So that is why it is incredibly important that organizations like Gun Owners of California, Gun Owners Foundation, Gun Owners of America, California Rifle and Pistol Association, National Rifle Association, National Shooting Sports Foundation, Firearms Policy Coalition, and every other group, Second Amendment Foundation, every other group that gets together to raise the money to fund solid, well-documented, and concise amicus briefs is incredibly important. There's no question about it. None of the victories that we've had, none of the progress that we've had in the courts would have happened without the multiple amicus briefs that have been filed by all of the various organizations. And we have been concentrating at Gun Owners California an immense amount of resources and time in trying to make that happen. And through Gun Owners Foundation, our legal arm, and the legal arm of Gun Owners of America, we know that our victories, no matter what happens in the upcoming elections, our victories are going to come through the courts in many cases, especially for places like California and Hawaii, Washington and Oregon. Unfortunately, more so for Arizona and Nevada, certainly, the other Western states. So yeah, it's incredibly important. Okay.
So Sam, you brought up the specific cases, and for the benefit of viewers and for me, for that matter, as you look at these cases, Young v. Hawaii, Rupp versus Becerra, exactly what is the benefit that we would get if your optimism is warranted and these cases go our way? What are they going to do for California and the other states that fall under the Ninth Circuit?
Well, if they go our way in the Ninth Circuit Court, the state of Hawaii and the Attorney General of California, Becerra, will have a very unique decision that they're going to have to make. With the imminent appointment of Amy Coney Barrett to the United States Supreme Court, they all know that will put a solid majority of originalists on the Supreme Court, those who believe that text, history, and tradition of the meaning of the words of the Second Amendment are what should guide all legal cases with regards to the Second Amendment. So they're going to have to look at this perspective. If I go to SCOTUS, I'm going to get my rear end handed to me in a basket. And if that happens, that means that the ruling applies nationwide. If the assault weapons case goes to the Supreme Court and they rule on text, history, and tradition and invalidate the California assault weapons law, it will invalidate the assault weapons bans nationwide. Controls against semi-automatic firearms will potentially be wiped off the books on states from sea to shining sea. In Young versus Hawaii, if they rule on the right to keep and bear arms with regards to carrying, bearing arms, as Scalia put it, that means taking firearms outside of the home, and they rule in our favor, that is going to have the potential of wiping out restricted CCW laws nationwide. It's going to open the door for open carry nationwide. There are huge implications as to what's going to happen. Now, we're going to enter a brave new world here, because Attorney General Becerra is going to have to decide whether he wants to take it to the Supreme Court or ask for an unprecedented en banc hearing. And that is an en banc hearing of the entire court, not just an 11-court panel, but all 29 sitting justices of the Ninth Circuit to rehear the case. That means they will set aside the ruling of the 11-judge panel if it goes our way, and all 29 judges will sit in panel to rehear this case all over again. But the net effect of that is that if Becerra wins, because the liberal conservative split on the court is still separated by 1 or 2 votes, we're still going to go to the United States Supreme Court, and the chances are much greater that we will be victorious through the Supreme Court. So it's now a delaying game. It's now politics, full tilt boogie. Becerra's got to hope that Donald Trump loses, and that when the Democrats come into power, that they pack the courts or do something in order to get an upper hand on the number of judges who don't think of the Constitution as an original document, and it should be interpreted according to the text, history, and meaning of the words when it was written. So that's unprecedented, but that is available to Attorney General Becerra, whether he chooses to take that step. All he is doing is delaying the net effect of them losing.
You have your finger on the pulse of this more than I. We have a lot of new gun owners, and I don't think we can assume that the Second Amendment is that they're single issue voters, or that the Second Amendment is the driving force in their decision of who's going to be president. But that said, I was astounded when Trump came to California the other day, and there were people lining the streets of Newport Beach and other places to greet him in the wacky state of California, in the People's Socialist Republic of California. I was amazed by that. And so, judging by membership or whatever you want to judge it by, are you starting to see California gun owners wake up?
Joel, the answer to that is absolutely. And they're doing it with proof, with evidence. They are buying guns at rates that we've never seen in the state of California before. We have many people who have been, they've voted, they've done their civic duty, they're moderate, and some of them would consider themselves liberal, and they voted party lines. And one of the benefits of COVID, number one, and the trashing of urban cities throughout the United States, and the fear that people of all stripes are now feeling that this violence will come to their doorstep, is making people one-issue voters. You talk to any gun store in the state of California, and I've spoken with many of them, they will tell me story after story after story of people who are coming in to buy their first gun, or coming in to buy their second gun after they have purchased their first gun during this time of violence and pandemic. That they never thought that America would be in the situation that we're in, especially here in California, that the violence wouldn't be where it is, that the police would not be there to protect them, because our city and county fathers and state leaders are preventing law enforcement officers from doing the job they were sworn to do by defunding them and then not protecting them when they go out to do the job that they were sworn to do. These people are voting with their pocketbooks. They have changed their perspective. Gun dealers, I have to hand it to California's gun dealers across the state. They have done a magnificent job of reminding these new gun owners that, hey, listen, you probably voted for the people that instituted all of these laws that are making you wait 10, 15, 30 days before you can get your gun, having to do background checks. People coming in and saying, why do I have to do a background check? I'm a law-abiding citizen. I haven't had a parking ticket in 30 years, or I've done nothing. Why do I have to have a background check? And why does it take 10 days according to the paperwork? And I come back and find out that they're so backed up that it's taking 15 days and sometimes 30 days and longer to have my background check done. Why is that happening? And I want a gun. Where do I go to find some training? And thankfully, every gun store that I know of has been able to direct people to acquire the kind of training that they need for firearm safety, for tactical training, for thinking about how to protect their homes, for the use of deadly force. All of these things are happening. The education that we have always been there to provide, that we have always encouraged to be disseminated, and the government has done everything possible to prevent us from doing it. They're not interested in doing it. They're not interested in doing it in the stores. They pass these laws that affect only law-abiding citizens, and they spend $0 to educate people about the new laws. Well, people are learning through the road of hard knocks. They're going and they're buying their guns, and they're finding that all of the concerns that they have when they're surveyed. Well, do you believe in universal background checks? Do you believe in waiting periods? Do you believe in this? And do you believe in training? And do you believe in that? And when they find out that we have all of those in the state of California, they say, what are they talking about? We have to pass a firearm safety test in order to buy a gun. We have to go through background checks. We have to undergo waiting periods. How come our fellow citizens in Arizona and Nevada and Oregon and Washington, they can walk in and walk out with a gun that same day? What's the difference? What is the difference? And they're learning that. And they're saying, this has got to change. This has got to change. And I think we will all be surprised at how much closer many elections are in the state of California. I'm not predicting that we're going to turn California Republican or red or anything.
Well, I got a buddy who is. I got a buddy. Pete has said to me the other day, Joel, I won't be surprised if California turns red. Now, I will be surprised if California turns red, but I've heard it from more than just one person. So, and I think a lot of it is driven off of the visuals that you see of these Trump supporters out there lining the streets when he drives by, or at the airport when he gets there, or for that matter, the responses that you're getting from gun shop owners and managers who I hope are signing people up for Gun Owners of California and Second Amendment support organizations and so on. And my hope is that organizations like yours are seeing a serious spike in membership as a result of all of this.
That is absolutely the case, Joel. That is exactly what is happening, that people are saying, what do I have to do to fight back? And I talk to these dealers because we send them packets of newsletters with voter score guides and election recommendations and information on what's happening to their gun rights in the courts. And so we get to converse with these dealers, and they are doing everything they can to direct people to Gun Owners of California, National Rifle Association, California Rifle and Pistol Association, FPC, all of the various groups. And they're saying, you need to get involved. The things that you can do if you want to be able to buy guns, learn how to use them, and keep them in your homes to prevent what you're watching on TV, the violence that's happening in our communities, come to your front door. You need to, number one, vote for the people who will protect your right to keep and bear arms. Number two, become active in organizations that are fighting to make that happen. That is the universal message that is being spread throughout the state of California. And frankly, states across the Fruited Plain. Joel, last time we did a show, I've done multiple national shows. I cannot tell you how many contributions and memberships we have received from people outside of the state of California saying, please keep the infection there. Don't let it spread. Fight with everything you've got to stop it in California so that it doesn't come to our beautiful states. And that's exactly what we're doing. And that's why it's important. Everybody is involved in this fight. If you live in free states of Wyoming, Montana, South Dakota, North Dakota, Oklahoma, most of Texas, all of the states, Tennessee, and places where the Second Amendment is respected, states that are passing state laws and constitutional amendments that protect the Second Amendment in those states. If you live in those free states, this battle is here, and the fight has to be fought here, and you have to be engaged, because this is where the cases are being generated that are going to go to the Supreme Court that will ultimately protect the Second Amendment across the nation. And so I invite everybody who's out there listening to this, excuse me, I'm getting all choked up here, to this podcast, that the Constitution belongs to every citizen of the United States. And the responsibility of fighting to protect it, to restore it and protect it, belongs to every citizen of the United States. So we invite you to get engaged. And it's a very, very important fight to
Sam, can you and I agree on this? And I suspect you can. You got a year or two on me, and I'm an old guy. Of course, I'm an older guy. You're very young looking, and so there you go. This is the most unusual year in my lifetime, and Trump's candidacy 4 years ago in 2016, his presidency and his candidacy now, and the whole election dynamic in both of these elections have been the most unusual elections in my lifetime as well, in the sense that there's such a populist movement, it seems, away from progressive leftist nonsense that it's almost as if the left is going through I don't know if that's my phone or yours. It's almost as if...
Sorry.
That's okay. It's almost...
I got a new phone system and I don't know how to turn it off.
I have my computer's giving me trouble right now because I changed some things. I got the same technology, man. I'm an old guy. I don't know how to use it, but we're doing the best we can. It'll work out. But my question was, it seems to me, and maybe it's just me, it seems to me that we almost have it's like there's this juggernaut heading forward that's almost an inevitability. And what I see is if it continues moving that way, we could see a renaissance in the Second Amendment. And frankly, I think we could see a more libertarian, if you want to call it that, renaissance in our country. Am I just losing my head here, or am I the only person seeing that?
Joel, 4 years ago, I was kind of a lone wolf out there in the wilderness saying that there is something amazing happening across the country, that Trump is capturing the hearts and minds of people, and not the political people, not the political elite. They're the ones who are saying, oh, he's not politically correct, he's too brusque, he's too, his Twitter and all of that stuff are so vulgar, and he shouldn't criticize and all of that stuff. But you know what? I started to get the sense really early on that what he was saying is what most of America was thinking. He was saying what people won't say in polite society because they don't want to create controversy. But secretly they were saying yes. And that was manifest in the hundreds of thousands of people that showed up to his rallies 4 years ago. That experience under the pandemic condition that we have, the unique situation that we are in, the left has used the pandemic and weaponized it to try to discredit President Trump. It's not his fault. He did not create the Wuhan virus. He was not in China spreading it to our beautiful shores.
No, but I think Hunter Biden might have been, but sorry, I just couldn't resist it. I apologize. Anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's happening again. When let's put it this way, the news does not want to cover how much response that President Trump is getting everywhere he goes, and Vice President Pence is getting everywhere they go. But they couldn't help but show what happened when he came to California. And there were not hundreds, not thousands, tens of thousands of people lining the streets with American flags, with Gadsden flags, with Trump flags, encouraging him as he came here. Tens of thousands. The other side characterized it, there were a few people showed up there. And the people saw the TV, even if it was just for a moment. They looked at Orange County and the streets of the beach communities there, and the people were lined up, and there were children and adults and senior citizens like you and me, and some even older than us, who were lining their streets with great enthusiasm for this president, because he is speaking their language. He is saying what they are thinking. I heard or saw a couple of interesting reports on some surveys, and they were calling it the bashful vote, the vote where people are not willing to say how they are voting because they're kind of bashful about admitting that they support Trump. That poll was skewed pro-Trump in a huge way, and that included everything from college students all the way up to senior citizens. There is something happening here that I think could send a thunderclap across the country. And people are reading all of the surveys. Remember, 4 years ago, every survey said that President Trump had absolutely no chance. He was getting trounced. There were no close races. Even red states, he wasn't going to win. Hillary Clinton was way ahead. These are the same polls that are saying that he's behind here and he's behind there. They're calling it a little bit closer, kind of hedging their bets. But these are the same polls that were saying the same thing 4 years ago. And they're reporting that, the early voting across the country has quadrupled, quintupled over 4 years ago. Early votes are in, and that the Democrats have filed so many more votes. And they say that, that means that they're voting for Biden because they're Democrats.
No, I've got some friends who are Democrats who are voting for Trump.
And there are a ton of people who have already voted, who are Democrats, who are voting for Trump across the country. And
by the way, the reverse is not true. In the primary, Trump got 94, I think, or 93% of the Republican vote in the primary. Now, you can say, well, he was the only real one running. No. You can still vote if you're a Republican for a Democrat in the primary. He got 90. He got more votes, a higher percentage of the Republican vote in the primary, I think, than any president in the history of our country.
That's correct.
It's astounding. And so I think it's roughly, we can sort of assume that 94% roughly of all of the Republican votes cast are going to Trump, but we cannot safely assume that the vast majority of Democratic votes are going to Biden. And besides which, and I know we're not on guns right now, but this affects our firearms rights as it does every other part of the Bill of Rights, and I think it's interesting to discuss. How do you win a campaign from your basement? I don't care how much help you're getting from the media. If you're sitting in your basement all the time, you can't win a campaign. I look at these rallies, if you want to call them, that Biden has and that Kamala Harris. Hey, let's just talk about the one that Obama did the other day. If they don't shower, they'll draw more flies than they do supporters. I mean, you look at these incredible tens of thousands of people that show up at these Trump rallies, and he's doing 2 or 3 or 4 of these things a day, and still commanding those kind of crowds everywhere he goes. And Biden can't fill a minivan. I mean, it's astounding to me how the polls can then indicate that there's going to be a landslide in Biden's favor. I'm going to make a public prediction right now. I'm not a pundit. I'm just a guy. I think that it's going to be, at minimum, it's going to be an electoral college landslide in Trump's direction, and it might be a popular vote landslide. I sure hope so, and I hope we keep the Senate and maybe win back the House. We might actually get right to carry reciprocity and some other things. I haven't kept my finger on it, so I'm not an analyst, but that's just a gut feeling. I don't know what you think of it.
Joel, you are absolutely correct. Nobody is paying attention to what's happening in the Congress and the Senate. Everybody is the same left-wing media that is being bolstered by billions and billions of dollars from billionaires to support Biden, who is burrowed into his basement, and they will not let him out, because every time he opens his mouth, he sticks his foot all the way down his throat. And every time people hear that, they say, "Oh my gosh, are you serious? This is our candidate? This is the guy that we're being expected to vote for?" But because they're not paying attention, the swell of support could very definitely affect the United States Senate. And although many of the pollsters are saying that the split in the Senate is probably going to get closer, I would not be surprised if it gets wider. And I wouldn't not be surprised if the Republicans make significant gains in the House. And I mean, there's a potential that they can take that over. And coming back to guns, that is exactly right. If that happens, we get national reciprocity passed nationwide. We get potentially a constitutional amendment from the Congress that will circulate the states to prevent any future administrations or Congresses from packing the courts and changing the number other than 9. That is a Second Amendment benefit. There are, we will be able to vote to who's going to be approved and confirmed for various positions in the administration that have to do with guns. President Trump has done an admirable job of rooting out those people who are anti-gunners in the administration. That is a very difficult thing to do, and he hasn't done it completely. And yes, we've disagreed with him on several occasions, but by and large, he has done much to protect the Second Amendment. And since nobody is paying attention to the Congress, that means that there are a lot of candidates out there who support the Second Amendment who are having who are not facing the billions and billions of dollar attacks against them because it's being so focused on the presidential race. So that is a net benefit.
Well,
I agree with you 100%.
Kind of brings up a subject, and we've been on for a while, so we probably ought to wrap up with this, but since we're opining here, we might as well opine a little bit more. If I'm a voter, which I am, and I've decided I'm going to vote for Trump because I want him to do the things he promised he was going to do. I want him to build the wall. I want him to drain the swamp. I want him to get those things done. Do I then vote for a Senate candidate that opposes him? Do I then vote for a House member who opposes him? I don't think so, unless I'm not paying attention. I think, and so if there's this incredible groundswell for Trump and his policies, it just seems logical to me. I'm not a pundit or whatever, but it seems logical to me that there's going to be a groundswell in the House and the Senate as well, because you don't want to support the president's policies and then create a situation where he can't get any of them done because he's fighting with a hostile Congress. Does that make any sense, or it makes
no total sense. You've got it right on. And I believe that President Trump understands that probably more than any president in that I can remember. This president is not afraid to get involved in congressional races and Senate races. He is taking his popularity and sharing it with those people who agree with him. And he is pointing out that their opponents disagree with all of the things that the people that you are talking about, who say they agree with the wall, they agree with his immigration policies, they agree with his position on the Second Amendment, they agree with what he did with the economy, where he, for millions of Americans, he restored their retirements by making a booming economy, by making fair trade mean fair trade. It's no more America as the whipping boy and had to hold up all of these other economies across the world by establishing trade agreements that were not equitable, that where American taxpayers were subsidizing countries throughout the world, where he said, no more of that. It's America first. We're going to take care of our people. We're going to improve our economy, which he did to the highest levels in the history of America. He kept his promises. He kept his promises on the Supreme Court. He kept his promises on the appellate courts and the district courts. He kept his promises on the wall on all of these issues. He has been a friend to freedom of religion. He has been a friend to freedom of speech. And people are just looking at that and they're saying, hey, I'm affected by that. I think more than ever, people are realizing that, hey, I cannot lose my retirement a second time because we have a president who gives us an economy that tanks the market, and I lose thousands upon thousands of dollars for my retirement. I can't have that happen. President Trump did it before. He said he's going to do it again. If he's elected,
he is doing it again.
Of building our economy and making America well again. Now, you're always going to have the leftist element that's going to try to upend things. And I think they've been emboldened. And for a long time, they were showing all of the impacts of that on the TV. You don't see it so much anymore, even though it's still happening, because they know that every time they show these riots in urban areas, moving out to suburban areas, that it bolsters Trump and it bolsters conservatives. It bolsters the people who believe that law enforcement is there with a responsibility to protect and defend us as best they can. And so they've stopped showing all of those things. That has to be an indication to people that one thing, in this unique year, people have not forgotten, because it has touched their pocketbooks, it's touched their families, it's touched their kids' educations, it's touched their entire lives. First time that a situation nationwide has affected people's, not only their vocations, their jobs, but their avocations, their vacations, their hobbies, the things that they enjoy have all been negatively affected by what is happening. Yes, by the pandemic and the way it's been handled by governors throughout the country, regardless of what the president says or directs. And then the violence that they see. You know, it was one thing when people in California saw violence in Chicago or New York or something like that. It was, yeah, those crazy people over there, or Atlanta or something like that, or in Chicago, you know, these various communities. Now it's happening right down the street from them.
Well, thank you very much, Sam. I really appreciate you coming on the show, and I want to urge you, if you're watching this, to please do join. If you haven't already joined Gun Owners of California, there's a link in the description, and if you can, add a little support to that, because the membership is very, very inexpensive, and they're doing a lot of work that requires a lot of fun. So if you can possibly contribute, please do. It's a great organization. Sam does a tremendous job, and it's because of the hard work of folks like Sam Paredes at Gun Owners of California and Rick Travis and the others at CRPA and so on. These folks all work together. They're doing some great work in California, and hopefully we'll be able to restore the rights of Californians, but not only Californians, but people across the land. Thank you again, Sam, very much. I really do appreciate your time. We're super long, so I probably ought to ring off at this point. And if you're still watching, thank you for watching. But thank you again, Sam, very much. I do appreciate it. Have a great week and stay safe, okay?
You too. Love you, brother.
All right. Now, a couple things I do want to mention to you real quick, and that is that it's important to vote. Okay, so don't go along and not vote. It's important that you vote unless you would like your society to look like this. Okay, and I realize it looks terrible, and no, it's just a background, but that could be a neighborhood coming to you if you don't vote the right way. So let's vote appropriately. Let's make sure that we're supporting our Second Amendment and every one of our rights in the Bill of Rights, one of which is the Second Amendment, but they're all super important. So make sure that you get out there, vote early. If not, go vote in person, but one way or the other. Study the material, do your homework, and vote wisely. I urge you to do that. Thank you very much for watching. If you stayed with us the whole time, I'm super proud of you. You're a Second Amendment supporter like nobody else. Be safe.